We are with Gina-Louise Sciarra.
Beautifully done.
Thank you. And she is the mayor of Northampton and a Smithie, has to be said.
Yep. Class of 96.
Class of 72.
Nice.
So tell me about your background. Did you grow up in Northampton?
I didn't. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. Okay. And so my first introduction to Northampton was when I came to visit Smith for the first time. And I always, I think that Smith and Northampton, the city, have this beautiful symbiosis. And I always say that one of the reasons I chose Smith was because of Northampton, that feeling I got when I first drove into downtown with my mom. And it just felt like it felt like this perfect college town, like kind of what you hope your college experience is going to be like. So yeah, that was my first introduction, and I loved being here. I spent my junior year abroad in Florence, Italy, not Florence, Northampton, but loved being here in Northampton. And then after college, I lived in San Francisco for 5 years, and then I lived in Brooklyn for 5 years. And my now husband, at that point, when we were just dating, we'd always said, like we were imagining where we wanted to settle. We realized Brooklyn probably wasn't going to be it. And we'd moved back to the East Coast from San Francisco to be closer to our families because we're both from New York. And we always said we wanted to move to a college town eventually like Northampton. And then I was in graduate school. So I was getting a PhD in sociology, which I haven't finished. I do have a master's though, from the City University of New York. And I worked on a study of women and non-Asian minorities in engineering. And Smith had just started their Picker program, which is their engineering school, which is the first program just for women in engineering. And so that had just been founded, as well as Olin College in Eastern Massachusetts, which is undergrad all engineering. So I worked on a National Science Foundation study that was comparing those two new engineering programs to MIT and to UMass. And I was coming here a lot and doing interviews, and my husband was writing a book, and we were just kind of trying to figure out next steps, and we just said, why not do it? Like, what's keeping us from just moving to Northampton? So we did.
So when did you become mayor?
I became mayor I was sworn in January of 2022.
So it's very recent.
Yes, pretty
What
recent.
did you do before that?
I got my master's and then ended up leaving graduate school and started doing some nonprofit work around. I worked for an environmental organization. I'm pointing this way because the iconic main church in the center of Northampton is called First Churches. I ran their capital campaign for quite a few years when their roof collapsed and we needed to rebuild the roof and actually ended up redoing the whole sanctuary. It's a beautiful space. So I worked there for a long time. Then I got kind of involved in some local political stuff and worked on campaigns and ran a campaign for someone who was running for city councilor at large. I also had 2 kids. So I had my older daughter in 2009 and my younger daughter in 2012. And my younger daughter was less than a year old when the counselor for the ward that I lived in, or still live in, which is Ward 4, said that she wasn't going to run again. And she's like, yeah, I don't know anyone who's interested. And I had been at home doing some freelance stuff, but mostly been at home with a toddler and an infant. And I said, you know what? I'll do it.
Time to break out.
Yeah, it was time to do something else. So, and that worked really beautifully with babies because council meetings at that point started at 7 p.m. So I would put my babies to bed with my husband, and then I would go and do council. And so, and as they got older, it changed, but I just kind of kept with it. So I was a counselor for 8 years. And I also, for quite most of that time, I worked for a nonprofit called Pathlight, which provides services for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities throughout all of Western Mass.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that led you then into the mayor's position.
Yep. So when the former mayor announced he wasn't running again, I sort of looked around and realized that I was one of the longest serving counselors at that point. I had moved from a ward counselor to an at-large counselor representing the entire city. I was the council president. I had led the council through the pandemic, or we were still in the pandemic at that point, but kind of brought us remote and brought us through a pretty challenging time, and realized I was the one who had the most experience and was kind of in the best position and sort of understood a lot of the initiatives that were moving forward, that needed to be carried forward, and had worked on them, and that I was the best person to lead the city. So I ran.
And here you are.
And here I am.
Excellent. What's the population of Northampton?
A little bit under 30,000. We're somewhere in the 29,000 range always, and have been pretty steady for a long time.
Okay. And how long has it been a city?
It has been, this is actually, what a great question. This is our 140th year of being a city.
Oh, that long.
Yes. So you see on our seal right there. Oh, is it on there? I thought it was, oh yes. So it was incorporated as a town in 1653 and then as a city in 1884.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you find is the biggest challenge being mayor of the city?
I would say resources always, right? So there are a lot, to run a city, we're a relatively small city, but we're a pretty complicated city. So we have we have complicated infrastructure. We have a wastewater treatment plant that handles the whole city. We have multiple ground level reservoirs. We have a very complicated water system. So we have a lot of infrastructure. And that all takes a lot of resources. And we're on the river, so we have levees and dike systems. We have all of this infrastructure that takes a lot of resources and often was built by the federal government and mandated by the federal government, but doesn't necessarily come with continuing resources to maintain it.
What do you love most about being mayor?
I would say what I love most about being mayor is the unbelievable privilege I have to be at some amazing moments in people's lives, just by virtue of my position. So for example, we are the only municipality in the Commonwealth that has 2 school districts. So we have the Northampton Public Schools, and we also have Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School, which is considered its own district. So I get to shake every graduate's hand at graduation every year. That I think is my greatest joy. So things like that, ribbon cuttings, helping people with issues that just really matter to them. Some of the initiatives that we have been working on, we're working on something called a Resilience Hub, which will be provide services, aggregate services, and provide a day center for people who are houseless in our community or who are at risk in our community. We've started something called the Division of Community Care in our Health and Human Services Department, which is a crisis response that is part public safety, but is an unarmed response. So it's meeting people who are having mental health issues or substance use issues or things like that are non-criminal issues where you don't need a police officer or even a fire EMS to be there, but need somebody to help them in a crisis and then help them with the next steps after that.
Oh, that's great.
So getting to do stuff like that is just really an incredible privilege, and I feel very, very lucky.
That's great.
Thanks.
Do you have a fairly large, or how large is your elderly population?
We do have, we have a growing older adult population, and our demographics show that sector is growing more and more in Northampton. We have a wonderful director of senior services, and we have a senior center, which has been going really, really well. And every month I've been getting more and more numbers from our director. She's now been there a couple of years, and every month she's just welcoming more and more people into the senior center, which is great. So we're working on doing age and dementia-friendly services and incorporating them into a lot of the things that we're working on. Also just working with the different city departments and making sure that they are have dementia-friendly training and kind of understand what to look for. The state is doing a giant Main Street redesign in a couple of years.
Oh.
So yes, this is a huge project. It's a $21 million project that Massachusetts Department of Transportation is doing. And that's because while we have a really beautiful Main Street, it's actually quite unsafe. We're in the top 5% of accidents because it's a few different things about the geography. It's very wide.
Wide, yeah.
The crosswalks are incredibly wide. We have angled parking. Some places it's 2 lanes, it feels like 1, then it goes to 1 lane. So there's just a lot of things that make it unsafe, and we have a lot of accidents. So that is getting redesigned, and our sidewalks are going to be wider, so we're making more space for people. The outdoor dining that we've enjoyed during the pandemic and still have now is going to be incorporated into the sidewalk. And it's going to be a lot safer, particularly for people with disabilities. So one of the things that's kind of beautiful about downtown Northampton is we're up on this hill, but it means that you have crossings where there's quite a pitch, and that's really hard for people in wheelchairs. So that's all going to kind of come up and be evened out, and will just be a lot safer for folks. And we're also incorporating more seating and just things to help older adults, and also signage and things that are important for people who have dementia, who are trying to sort of orient themselves and make sure that they're in a safe space.
Interesting. That's great. Good stuff.
Thanks. I talked about the Division of Community Care, but another thing I started was a department of, it's called CAPA, Climate Action and Project Administration. So we were the first community in Massachusetts to have an energy and sustainability officer. Now, I think that was maybe 19 years ago, but we now have a department that's devoted to climate action and ensuring that any of the projects that we're working on, any of our capital projects, are going to be viewed through that lens and make sure that we are moving us towards our goals. So we have a city goal of 2030 having all municipal operations be carbon neutral, and then a city-wide goal of 2050. And so making sure that anything that we're doing is moving us towards those goals.
That's excellent. Have you had flooding issues from the rivers here in Northampton?
We have. So last summer was a really tough summer for us. We had flooding from the Connecticut River and the Mill River, and there was damage of farmland, and as I said, we have these levee systems, and we have a pump station, and it really put that equipment to the test.
What is the major economic force driving the economy?
Some people do commute, but we do. We have Smith is a huge employer for us, as is the hospital. We have a lot of nonprofits. We also have a lot of writers. So I'm not sure what the percentage is, but we have an amazing community of children's book authors who live here, and authors of all kinds of books. So we have a large creative community as well. We have a lot of artists.
Yeah. You can tell when you walk around town.
Yeah.
It's a very artistic community.
Yep. Yeah, so it's a pretty varied base. We have a lot of therapists. We have a lot of people who do service work. How often do you get to come to Northampton, and what changes have you seen?
Well, I was here for my 50th 2 years ago.
Okay.
And so I had been to a few reunions, not every 5 years, but a few. Mm-hmm. And so gradually saw some of the changes, but I mean, it's just so much more vibrant and alive, and so much more diversity with everything, not only the population, but the small businesses.
Yeah.
And it's a very busy community, but Miss Flo's Diner is just like it was.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yes, Miss Flo's is an institution, so I'm glad you've made it back there.
Yes.
Yeah, we do have a really bustling, vibrant downtown, and we're really proud of it. And that is, in terms of the revenue that we bring in, our local excise revenue, so from our downtown, whether it's meals tax or it's hotel motel, that is a larger percentage of our revenue than a lot of other communities. So I think that indicates how vibrant our downtown is and how important it is.
Yeah, I mean, everybody I talk to, they don't have to be Smithies, who's been in Northampton, loves Northampton. So
That makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah, it's great.
It is. It is a great little city. I'm really proud of it.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time with us. We appreciate it, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you. To you too. Thanks so much for coming back to Northampton. We're so happy you're here.
So are we.